sunny day in Oakland, and I was a 5th grader, a 10-year-old, happily eating this delicious pork kimchi fried rice that my mom had packed for me for lunch. So I was relishing each bite, getting ready to go to my next class, when my friend across the table, another 10-year-old just like me, she asks me, "Do Koreans eat dogs?" So when I heard this as a 10-year-old, I had no idea of how to respond or what to say. And in fact, I didn't know if this was true myself. So I said to her, after I defroze, "I don't know. I don't know if this is true, and I don't know if Koreans eat dogs." And though I was expecting her to apologize or at least rephrase her question, she instead became defensive, and she became more opinionated than before. She argued that she had seen videos of us Koreans, eating dogs online, and some of her peers and parents had told her that it may be true. Fast forward to 2024. It was a few days after President Trump had announced that immigrants in Springfield were eating the dogs and eating the cats. I was eating dinner, again, I was eating, and then my friend called me saying that a few people barked at her in Berkshire. And when I heard this, I knew that maybe the other party did not have such bad intentions, but regardless, my friend, she felt alienated, and she felt like a disgrace to this community, and she felt like she didn't belong. And I don't think that was supposed to happen here at Berkshire. So both my friend and I, we've experienced some form of insensitivity. And this form is called micro-insults and microaggressions. And most of us don't realize when we're doing it or when we're saying it, but it's really harmful, especially for the victim. It's really easy to assume facts and have biases and prejudices about a person or culture and group. Let me tell you my experience too. Before coming to America, I had this perception of small talk because I hated it. I was scared of it, because it wasn't so small to me. It was two strangers talking to each other for an unnecessarily long amount of awkward time. And I just didn't like the concept. But after adjusting to this culture and assimilating here for long enough, I soon realized the value of small talk, that by stepping out of my comfort zone and talking to people that I would never otherwise have talked to, I can gain so much valuable insight and knowledge that I would not have otherwise acquired. So this leads me to my main topic of the day, which is the idea of possessing intellectual and cultural humility. And this sounds fancy, but in its essence, it means the value of having an open mind, of being humble, of showing your lack of superiority to others, and being respectful. Even though this sounds really simple, it's easy for us as overconfident teenagers to underestimate this skill. According to Pew Research Center, us, the Gen Z, we are today's most diverse, most digitally active, and the most educated generation alive in this world today. So by looking at this, you may think, doesn't that make us more capable because we're so connected and globalized on the internet? Doesn't that make us more capable of fostering positive connections with others? But that's not the case. It actually makes us more susceptible to being offensive unconsciously. We must remind ourselves constantly as we go about our days that social media, the ones where we spend hours on every day on our phones and computers, is a trick. It's an illusion, and due to this mass consumerism culture and user-driven media platforms, it's becoming so easy to spread false information in just a split of a second. So it's even more critical to have this humility that I keep talking about, to have an open mind, because that's the first step to recognize that we may be wrong. This is a sad but true fact that 3 in 5 adults, US adults, believe and see fake news, and a lot of people assume that it's true before realizing that it's fake. So I think that's why educational institutions like us, Berkshire, must teach its students the real value of having critical perspectivism, which is the value of having digital literacy. And digital literacy innately ties to my concept of humility, because both requires us to acknowledge our biases and to know where our sources of knowledge really come from. This summer, I had the chance to talk to the head of South Korea's Wall Street Journal. And the first thing that he told me when we met was to approach every day like a scientist. And as we've all learned in our middle school science class, scientific method requires us to ask questions, observe, and avoid jumping to insubstantiated conclusions. And I believe this is the first step to fostering a healthy, positive, connected community. So just like we look in the mirror every morning, it's crucial to ask ourselves questions before asking others, before making insensitive and impolite comments to others. Let me give you another example, because this summer I also met a friend. She was a Korean immigrant who lives in Tampa in Florida. And I had this stereotype in my mind about the South, because I've never been to the South. I wasn't an immigrant. The only thing I had in common with her was that we were both Korean. So I had this automatic urge to say, oh my God, it must be really hard living in the South, because I assumed there's going to be few Asians there, and I assumed that she would have felt excluded. But before asking her this, I took a second to pause and realize that I don't really have any hard facts that make me eligible to ask her such a question, and that my knowledge of the South was based on pure stereotypes and not real experiences. So this made me to rephrase my question, and I asked her, how's Tampa? How's it really like? Do you really enjoy the community? And had I not asked her this, I would not have realized that she actually really likes it there, and that her identity as a Korean immigrant growing up in the South was so different from mine as an international student who has never been to the South and who has lived only in Korea and the East Coast. And I know this sounds tedious and unnecessary, this practice of practicing humility, but I want us to train our muscles. Like, this is a muscle. Cultural humility and having an open mind is something we need to practice every day for them to become strong and really embedded in our memories, to practice it unconsciously. So the hardest part for us is assuming we are fallible. Because, like I've said, we are overconfident, and humans are naturally egotistic, and we want everything we say and do to be right. So in the beginning, it's going to be really easy to make mistakes and make unintended negative impacts on others. But instead of becoming defensive and shying away like my friend did in 5th grade at the lunch table, let's practice apologizing and actively listening and actually showing the willingness to cooperate instead of shying away, because that does no good to anyone. Let's make it a trend, because I know we're so good at making trends. Let's make it a trend to pause, reflect, and make it the final last step to act instead of the other way around. Because doing it the other way around is where most things go wrong today in this world, in this polarized, divided society. So before going off stage, I want to return to my 5th grade story of my friend asking if Koreans had 8 dogs. After hearing this short speech I shared with you today, I want you to imagine yourself in my friend's perspective, watching someone else of a different culture eating this unfamiliar food. And maybe you want to ask them an insensitive question. Maybe you're inclined to do so, and that's okay. But maybe starting tomorrow, you can challenge yourself and step out of your comfort zone a little bit. And ask yourself, what biases do I have, and how will these little biases that I take for granted can really pivotally shape my interactions with other people? How can they make my experiences more positive and meaningful? And I want to end with this quote. It's from a book that I read over summer. And Emma Goldman had said, "What I believe is a process, not a finality." And I want this to encapsulate the idea that learning is an infinite process, and that whether we like it or not, we will always be learners in Berkshire. We will always have something to learn from others, because no matter how much we think we know something about someone, even if we're from the same ethnicity, culture, or gender, we'll never really truly be in their perspective. So it's crucial, again, to ask questions. Let's possess this attitude. I want to end with this favorite cartoon of mine, that attitudes are contagious. And each of us possessing this humility that I talked with you today, I believe that every one of us sitting here today can become leaders and make Berkshire a place where people don't have to feel marginalized. Thank you.